I learned how to count the chairs at every wedding. Always one too many, always one left empty. It was mine, though no one ever saved it for me. I'm Hannah, youngest of 5. And when I say youngest, I don't mean a year or two. I mean, I came a full decade after the next sibling, like I was some afterthought, scribbled into the margins of a chapter already written. Max, the eldest, was already driving when I was born. Drew and Olivia were heading to high school. Ethan was the closest to me in age, but even he kept a safe emotional distance, like I was a guest on a show that had already ended. To me, they were stars. I memorized Max's laugh. I tried walking like Olivia with her perfect posture and breezy indifference. I even practiced how Ethan said cool because I thought maybe that would make him look at me like a real person. But mostly, I stayed small, quiet, good, because that's what the little ones are supposed to be easy to ignore. The first time I understood what that really meant, I was 10. Max was getting married. Sarah, his fiancée, was tall, gentle, and smiled like she already belonged to us. I adored her. I was so sure I'd get to go to their wedding. I even picked out one of Mum's old necklaces, a little heart-shaped pendant I used to hold up to the mirror and whisper, almost grown up. The day they told me I wouldn't be going, I had just finished writing a homemade card for Max, glitter glue and all. Mum sat me down gently on the couch like she was about to explain a natural disaster. Her voice was sweet rehearsed. Max and Sarah are having a child-free wedding, honey. That means no kids. I'm sorry. I blinked. But I'm not a kid. I'm your daughter. I'm his sister. She patted my hand like I was a cat that didn't understand thunder. You'll understand when you're older. I remember her words word for word because I repeated them that night over and over into my pillow. When you're older. When you're older. But even at 10, I knew what she meant wasn't about age, it was about place. And mine was not at their table. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't cry in front of them. But I did cry later, alone, quietly enough that no one came to check. That Saturday, they all got dressed up in soft silk and navy suits. I sat on the steps in my almost dress and watched them leave. Dad told me to be a good girl for the babysitter and kissed my forehead without meeting my eyes. I remember the smell of lasagna reheated in the microwave. I remember staring at the clock like it was going to change its mind and reverse time. Mostly, I remember the chair. There was a chair in the corner of the living room next to the big front window. From there, I could see the driveway where they'd pulled out in the car. I sat in it all night, pretending I was there at the wedding instead. I imagined myself tucked beside Olivia, holding Sarah's bouquet while she danced. I pictured Max ruffling my hair during a toast. The next morning they came back laughing. Sun-kissed from the honeymoon. No one asked if I'd missed them. No one said, "We're sorry you couldn't be there." Max didn't even look at me. He was busy showing Ethan something on his phone. That was the first time I understood something essential about our family. In their story, I was not written in. Not really. I was the little sister, sure. Technically, but not practically, not emotionally. I was a bonus track no one listened to. And the chair, the one by the window, stayed empty. Not just that night. Again and again. It became a symbol I'd carry silently from room to room, year to year. The chair left for me was one that no one had set aside. The space no one expected me to fill. I didn't know it yet, but that chair would show up at every wedding after. Not physically, but in my imagination, in my chest. Always waiting, always unclaimed. They never told me I didn't belong, but they never had to. I was 12 when Drew got married. 2 years older, 2 years quieter. By then, I had learned the rules of being the youngest, not to expect too much, not to speak too loudly, not to take up space I hadn't been clearly offered. So when the news came, another child-free wedding, I didn't ask questions. I didn't plead. I just nodded. That kind of silence felt advanced, like I'd finally mastered what it meant to be well-behaved. Mum told me at breakfast. Her tone was light too light, like she was talking about the weather. Drew and Melissa want an adults-only ceremony. It's nothing personal, sweetheart, nothing personal. That phrase is funny, isn't it? As if the act of excluding someone you live with, love, and eat dinner with every day could be done without it affecting them personally. But I didn't argue. I just stirred my cereal until it went soggy. I remember her trying to comfort me later that afternoon. I was sitting on the back porch steps, watching ants navigate a crack in the concrete. She sat beside me and smoothed down the hem of my shirt like I was still a toddler who needed tidying. One day, she said softly, "You'll have your own beautiful wedding. You'll get to do it exactly the way you want." I didn't look at her. I just nodded again. I don't want a dazzling someday, I thought, if it means swallowing every dull today in silence. Noah would later tell me that kind of thinking was maturity far too early. But back then, it didn't feel noble. It felt like shrinking. That week, during dinner, I remember trying to join in a conversation. It was one of those chaotic family meals where everyone spoke over each other, loud laughter dishes, clinking forks, tapping plates in chorus. Max was talking about a new job. Olivia had just returned from a trip to Italy and was describing the wine like she'd discovered oxygen. Drew and Melissa were debating honeymoon destinations, tossing names like Santorini and Banff across the table like ping-pong balls. I waited for the perfect pocket of silence, like finding a safe crossing on a busy street. And when it came, I slipped in quietly. "I think I want to try ballet." It wasn't random. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, dreaming of the delicate shoes, the spin of bodies defying gravity. I didn't want to be a ballerina, not really. I just wanted to move, to be seen, to belong to something graceful. Olivia turned to refill her wine. Max leaned across the table, laughing at something Ethan said, and just like that, the conversation swerved right past me. No one responded, not even Mum. It wasn't cruel. It was worse, it was casual. And that, I think, was when I stopped trying to be heard. I stared at my plate and listened to the sound of their glasses clinking, rising above the chatter, like a song I didn't know the words to. That sound, I thought, that's what it feels like to be invisible. Like a toast that never includes your name. That night, I sat on the floor of my room and watched the dust swirl in the glow of my nightlight. I imagined the wedding happening without me again. The chairs, the flowers, the music, the jokes I wouldn't hear, the photos I wouldn't be in. And I thought of the chair again, the one by the window, still empty, still waiting, but now it didn't ache. It just sat there, like me. By the time Drew and Melissa returned from their honeymoon, I didn't even ask how it went. No one offered to tell me either. Max teased Ethan about his terrible dance moves. Olivia raved about the decorations. My parents passed the wedding album between them, laughing at candid shots pointing out relatives who'd gotten drunk. I sat at the edge of the couch, cushion quiet. Small. A part of me wanted to stand up and scream. Another part was tired, already tired of being the only one who remembered I wasn't invited. So instead, I smiled when they looked at me. And I said nothing. Because that's what little sisters are supposed to do. When Olivia got engaged, I was 15 3/4. I remember that number so vividly because it felt so important, like a milestone just shy of a miracle. I was so close to 16 that I could feel it in my bones, like it might finally open a door that had been locked my whole life. At first, the wedding talk was different, lighter, hopeful. "There's no child-free rule this time," I heard Mum say to Dad in the kitchen one night. "Olivia wants a big, inclusive day. Everyone together." I froze in the hallway, clutching my book as it might disappear. I didn't breathe. I didn't dare hope too much. But my heart was already racing ahead of me. For a few weeks, everything pointed to yes. Invitations were being discussed. My name came up in the seating plans. I overheard someone suggest I could help hand out programs at the ceremony. I told myself not to get excited, but I did. Of course I did. I picked out a dress in my head. I started practicing how I might say something funny for Olivia's toast just in case. I even asked Jenna, my best friend, if she thought I should curl my hair for the occasion. And then it changed. It was subtle at first, a conversation I wasn't invited to, a side glance when I walked into the room. Mum bites her lip while she scrolled through something on her phone. Then came the new rule. No one under 16, Olivia said over dinner one evening. Her voice was calm, practiced, like she was reading from a script handed to her by someone else. I blinked. Wait, what? She didn't even look up from her plate. There's just been a lot of feedback from family. It's easier this way. I waited for anyone to step in, to say, but Hannah's not like the others. No one did. So I stood up from my chair, slowly, deliberately. Olivia, I said, my voice cracking even though I hated it. Can I be the exception? Just me. I'll be quiet. I'll be good. She finally looked up. If I make an exception for you, I'd have to do it for everyone. That wouldn't be fair, I laughed. It came out sharp and dry, like something snapping inside me. Fair, I said louder. Are you seriously going to talk to me about fair? The room fell still. Mum gave me that warning look, chin slightly raised, eyebrows tight. Hannah, lower your voice. No, I said, trembling. It's not fair that I've missed every single one of your weddings. It's not fair that you keep pretending I'm just another child when I'm your sister. You're making a scene, Olivia muttered. I turned to her, tears already sliding down my cheeks, but my voice was steel. I'm not making a scene. I'm making a point. Then I stormed out, slammed the door so hard the wall shook. I knew I'd pay for it. I didn't care. For the first time, I chose not to be small. Later that night, Mum came into my room. Her face was tight with a calm that scared me more than yelling ever could. That was unacceptable, she said. You embarrassed Olivia. You upset everyone. You will not be attending the wedding, and you are grounded. 6 months. 6 months. The words landed like bricks. I stared at her. For being hurt. For being selfish, she replied coldly. Selfish, I thought, for wanting to matter. The next few weeks passed like shadows. I wasn't allowed to leave the house for anything outside of school. No phone, no Jenna, no talking about the wedding. On the day of Olivia's ceremony, the house was buzzing with hairdryer perfume and distant laughter. I stayed in my room, wrapped in silence. I stared at the ceiling, at the walls, at my hands. Later, after they'd all left, I walked into the living room. They'd left the framed wedding photo on the mantel already displayed like a trophy. I stood in front of it, studying every smiling face, every well-dressed sibling, every carefully curated moment of joy. They looked happy, complete. I wasn't in it. Of course I wasn't. No one even thought to leave a space. No chair, no shadow, no trace of me at all. By the time Ethan got engaged, I was 17. And I didn't ask. Not because I didn't want to go, but because by then I had learned that hope wasn't something you carried into our family's living room unless you wanted to watch it burn. I first heard about the engagement through Amanda, my cousin, who lived a few towns over. She sent me a picture late one night. Ethan and his fiancée were on the beach, their feet half buried in sand, holding a cheesy wooden sign that said, "She said yes." Amanda's message was simple. Can you believe it? Finally, I stared at it, my phone screen glowing too brightly in my dark room. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was shocked, not because I was jealous, just because I already knew what was coming. A week later, Amanda texted again. Got my invite today. The wedding's in May. It's going to be super elegant. Ethan said no kids like usual, lol, but I made the cut. She was 18, 3 months older than me. 3 months. That was the difference between being seen and being invisible. 3 months, 90 days, a quarter turn of the sun. That's what stood between me and an invitation. That's what turned Amanda barely older, barely closer into an adult, while I remained the girl sitting at the edge of family dinners, waiting for someone to notice she'd grown. I didn't reply to Amanda's message, not out of malice. Just, what was there left to say? What could I possibly write that didn't sound like begging again? So I set my phone down on the nightstand and stared up at the ceiling. And I let the silence settle around me like an old coat I'd outgrown, but still wore anyway. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but I did something more dangerous. I stopped feeling. There's a particular numbness that follows repeated hurt. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one day, quiet and patient. That was the night it found me. The next morning, I overheard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. Yes, of course, Amanda's invited. Well, she's 18 now. I know it's such a lovely idea, garden wedding in May. She saw me in the hallway and paused for a second, maybe to see if I'd say something. I didn't. She smiled nervously. You're being very mature about this, sweetheart. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had nothing left to offer them but silence. Is this what you wanted, I thought. A daughter who finally stopped asking to be loved out loud. That weekend, we had a small family dinner. Olivia was talking about nursery colours for her baby. Max was arguing about the best vacation spots for spring. Ethan was glowing, talking about his honeymoon plans. I sat quietly spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate, letting their laughter wash over me like elevator music. Amanda arrived late, breathless and excited, waving her wedding invitation like a golden ticket. This design is so classy, right? She gushed. And guess what? Ethan said I might get to help organise the photo booth. Everyone oohed and ahed. I nodded politely, smiled, sipped water. That's the thing about being excluded enough times, I thought. Eventually, you learn how to vanish without leaving the room. After dinner, I went upstairs and opened my desk drawer. Inside was a shoebox where I kept small pieces of memory, a ribbon I'd once hoped to wear at Olivia's wedding, the glittery card I'd made for Max when I was 10, a swatch of lace I'd found at a fabric store when I imagined making my own dress one day. I looked at it all. Then I put the lid on and slid it to the back of the drawer. That was the night I made a promise to myself I would never wait for them again. Not for their approval, not for their attention, not for a seat at a table they'd spent years reminding me I wasn't welcome at. They wouldn't notice the change, not right away. But something inside me had shifted. The longing had gone quiet, and in its place, something else had taken root, something quieter, stronger. Resolve. Not the angry kind. The kind that closes a door gently, then locks it, then throws away the key. I met Noah in the middle of February, the kind of month where the air stings and everyone's pretending they're not lonely. He was standing in front of me at a campus coffee shop arguing with the barista about the last lemon poppy seed muffin. I think I saw it first, he said, grinning. And I think I need it more, I replied without thinking. He looked at me, paused, then laughed. Split it, we did. At a corner table by the window, with steam curling from our cups and strangers walking by bundled in scarves. He told me he was studying psychology. I told him I wasn't sure what I was doing, just that I wanted to be anywhere but home. We talked for hours like we were making up for years of silence in one sitting. But it wasn't until weeks later in his apartment that the real story came out. It was late one of those nights where the world felt too quiet to lie. I sat cross-legged on his couch while his dog Millie snored at our feet. The lights were dim. The air smelled like cinnamon and dog shampoo. He asked something simple. What's your family like? I smiled. the fake kind. Then something cracked. I started talking about Max's wedding when I was 10, how I begged to go and was left with a babysitter instead. About Drew when I was 12 and how I didn't cry that time because I'd already learned it didn't matter. About Olivia, who told me it wouldn't be fair, and how I got grounded for yelling that I wasn't just a kid, I was her sister. About Ethan, whose wedding I never even asked about, because by then the answer was already tattooed across my heart. And Amanda. Always Amanda. 3 months older, 3 months more human. I expected Noah to nod politely. Maybe say, "That's rough." Instead, he stared at me quite stunned, like I just told him the sky was upside down. "Wait," he said slowly, "they didn't invite you." "Not once," I shook my head. "But you're their sister." The way he said it like it was something sacred, undeniable, written in the stars, it made my throat close up. He kept looking at me like he was trying to find an explanation that didn't exist. "Jesus," he muttered, that's messed up." And that's when it hit me. No one had ever been shocked for me before. Not my parents, not the school counsellors, not even friends who knew parts of the story. People had pitied me, shrugged, said things like, "You'll get your chance someday." But Noah was angry on my behalf. It felt like standing in front of a mirror for the first time and realising the bruises weren't just in your head. I sat back on the couch blinking hard. I guess I just got used to it. Noah shook his head. "That's the worst part. You shouldn't have had to." Later, we were scrolling through old Facebook albums, wedding photos of Olivia Max, all of them. I didn't even flinch anymore. He squeezed my hand. "They don't know what they lost." I looked at the screen. All those smiles. All those perfect centerpieces and coordinated suits and curated moments. And not one of them included me. I laughed. It wasn't bitter, just hollow. "They'd say I was too young," I murmured. Noah didn't respond. He just let me sit with it. I turned to him. "You know what's strange? I've spent so long telling myself it didn't hurt, that it was normal. That child-free meant I wasn't meant to be there, not because of who I was, but because of some neutral rule. But it wasn't neutral. It was just easier to exclude me than to make space." He nodded slow and thoughtful. "You've normalized being hurt." I swallowed. The words hit too clean, too true. "Yeah," I whispered. "I guess I have." And that's when I realized something else. I had spent years twisting myself into understanding, into patience, into silence. I had built a shrine to, it's not personal in my mind just to survive it, because it's easier to believe you're being logical than to admit you've been discarded. But Noah didn't let me look away. He was the mirror I didn't know I needed, not to show me my pain, but to show me that it was real, that it shouldn't have been normal, that I was allowed to grieve the seat I never got. He looked at me like I mattered, not because I had something to offer, not because I was old enough, quiet enough, good enough, but just because I was. And for the first time, I saw myself through that lens, whole, worthy, not missing anything. I was never the problem. I was just never their priority. But maybe, finally, I could start being mine. Noah proposed on a rainy Sunday in October. It wasn't flashy, no fireworks or secret photographers hiding in bushes. Just us in our apartment dancing barefoot in the kitchen to an old jazz record. He held my face in his hands, looked me dead in the eye and said, "I want to spend every ordinary day with you." I said yes. Through tears and laughter and a mouthful of cinnamon toast, I said yes. The next day, I bought a notebook and started the guest list. And this time, I didn't have to wonder whether I'd make the cut. But as I wrote names, friends who'd held me up, professors who'd believed in me, neighbours who brought soup when I was sick, there was a deliberate blankness to one part of the page. No Max, no Drew, no Olivia, no Ethan. I didn't cross them out. I simply never wrote them. It wasn't a decision made out of spite. It was made out of clarity. They hadn't wanted me at their most important moments. Why should I hand them mine like a wrapped gift? For once I wasn't looking to be forgiven or included. I was just free. The storm didn't arrive right away. It always takes time for people to notice a boundary, especially when they've spent years stepping over you like a doormat. But 2 months before the wedding, it came. First, it was Mum. She called while I was driving home, her voice unusually sweet, like sugar trying to hide poison. "So, sweetheart," she began, "how are the wedding plans coming along?" "Good," I said, cautious. "That's wonderful," she chirped. "Your siblings haven't received their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I did," I said. "I sent out all the invitations." There was a pause. A long one, the kind that makes your ears ring. "Maybe theirs got lost in the mail," she asked. "No, Mom," I said, soft but firm. "They're not invited." Silence. Then came the fury. "What do you mean, they're not invited? They're your family. Hannah." I pulled the car over, took a breath, and said the sentence I had waited years to say. "I'm not the one who started this, Mum. I'm just the one who's finally ending it." She sputtered, begged, guilt-tripped, said words like unforgiving, cruel, and spiteful, but none of them stuck. I hung up. That night, the family group chat lit up like fireworks. Olivia, of course, went first. "Olivia, hey Hannah, I think something happened with the mail. We didn't get our invites." Then Drew. "What's going on? Why are we not on the guest list?" Ethan didn't say anything, just dropped a passive-aggressive gif of a waving hand. I read them all. Then I put my phone down and left every message on scene. That silence. It was no longer about exclusion. It was power. It was the sound of me choosing myself. Noah walked in, saw the unread tension on my screen, and sat beside me on the couch. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "They're freaking out." He scrolled through the messages, eyebrows raised. "You don't owe them anything, you know," he said. I know, I replied, but inside something deeper stirred. I used to be the girl who begged to be included, who would have given anything for a seat at the table, even if it meant sitting at the corner napkin in lap, speaking only when spoken to. Now, I was the woman setting the table, and this time blood alone wasn't the ticket in. That night, I sat in the quiet. I used to fill silences with justification. They were older, they didn't mean it, maybe next time. But now, the silence was different. It wasn't empty, it was full of choice. My choice. And that was something new entirely. The garden was glowing. String lights draped between tall sycamores twinkling like stars that had decided to come down and witness love for once. Flowers bloomed in full colour as if nature herself had RSVP'd yes. The air smelled like lavender and the promise of new beginnings. It was the kind of wedding I used to imagine as a kid. Only back then, I always pictured Olivia helping me into my dress. Drew giving a toast. Ethan teases Noah during the vows. Max sat quietly in the back, but offered a nod that said, "You finally made it." Instead, it was quiet, peaceful, real. I stood in front of the mirror, fixing the last button on my dress, when Jenna, my maid of honor, walked in. "You look like a dream," she whispered. I smiled, not quite meeting her eyes in the reflection. "You okay?" she asked, gently sitting beside me. I nodded, then shook my head. "I'm not sad about today," I said softly. "I'm sad that I once wanted them to be here." She didn't respond right away, just reached out and held my hand. "It's okay to mourn what you never got," she said. And just like that, the tears came. Not loud, just a single line down each cheek. Not because I missed them, but because I had spent so many years shaping myself to be wanted by people who never saw me. I walked over to the small table where wedding gifts were arranged, ribbons, ivory boxes, delicate calligraphy. Tucked in one corner was a small package I had wrapped myself. It was never meant to be opened, just kept. It was the gift I had planned to give Olivia years ago before her wedding. A necklace I bought with babysitting money. Pale pink, fragile, hopeful. I picked it up, untied the satin bow. The knot came undone too easily, like it had been waiting years to be released. I was 10 when I saved for this gift. I thought giving would earn me a place. That love could be exchanged like presents if only I was generous enough, quiet enough, small enough. But this ribbon, it was never about her. It was about me. It held all the versions of me they never let grow. I placed the bow on the edge of the table like a ribbon laid at the feet of a grave. Not for Olivia, for the girl I used to be. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew before answering that it would be someone from them. Aunt Linda, I answered flat. Oh, sweetheart, she began in that syrupy tone of forced compassion. I heard, and I just have to say, family is forever. I looked out at the garden where Noah was greeting guests and laughing under lantern light. If forever means enduring pain just because it shares your last name, I said calmly, then I'll take something shorter, but honest. She huffed. You'll regret this one day. I hung up. No anger, no drama, just a full stop. A boundary sealed. And then the music started. I stepped into the aisle, the sky softening into twilight. Noah stood at the end, eyes full of something I had never seen in anyone's gaze before recognition. Like he saw every scar, every silence, every empty chair, and still chose me. When I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, "You ready?" I nodded, but before I could speak, he leaned in forehead to mine. "This is just the beginning," he said, and in that moment I believed him. The ceremony unfolded like something written by the parts of me that never stopped hoping. We laughed, we cried, we said yes. No performance, no pretending, just presence. When we kissed, the lights flickered softly like even they knew. I wasn't missing anything. They were the ones who missed everything. The wedding had been perfect. So perfect, in fact, that it scared me. Because perfection never lasts. And sure enough, the shadows came knocking again. This time, not through words, but through persistence. Through shame dressed as a concern. Rachel's post was the first blow. A filtered photo of her own wedding, sun-kissed and manicured, captioned in cursive, "Family is who shows up, not who walks away." Subtle? Yes, but sharp. The comments rolled in like whispers in a crowded room. Some people forget blood is thicker. Sad how easily people rewrite history. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the comment thread again. Let them curate their version. They always were better at performance. Me, I'm finally living without an audience. Noah saw the post later that night. He frowned, then turned to me. "You sure you're okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure. I was free. Yes, but freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't always come with comfort. Sometimes it arrives with quiet guilt, especially when you've been trained your whole life to believe obedience equals love. 2 mornings later, I heard a knock. Firm. Familiar. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach clench. It was Mum. Hair-styled earrings on lips pressed tight with something between resolve and shame. She didn't wait for an invitation. Just stood there until I opened the door. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I echoed. She looked older than I remembered. Not in years, in weight, emotional weight. Regret dragged at her shoulders like wet fabric. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked slowly into the apartment, glancing at the photos on our wall, me and Noah, in Colorado Millie, in a Halloween costume, a sunset we chased in Vermont. No family portraits, no remnants of them. She sat at the kitchen table like she had when I was 13, helping me rehearse for the school play. But this wasn't a rehearsal. This was opening night. I don't know what to say anymore, she began, voice low. It feels like you're gone. I sat across from her. My hand stayed in my lap. I didn't disappear, Mum. I just stopped shrinking. Her eyes glistened. They miss you, you know. Max, he keeps asking about you. Olivia's heartbroken. Rachel. I shook my head. Rachel posted a public jab 2 days after my wedding. She winced. I leaned in. I get it. You love them. You always have. I'm not asking you to stop. Pause. But I can't keep loving people who make me feel small every time I stand beside them. She blinked. Once. Twice. Honey, they were just trying their best. No, I said quietly. They were trying their easiest. She reached for my hand. I let her. And then slowly, gently, I pulled mine back. I'm done explaining why I deserve to exist in the rooms they walk into. Her eyes dropped to her lap. She stood up. Is there any way back from this? I looked at her. If there is, they'll have to walk it. Not me. She left without another word, and I didn't watch her go. That evening, I sat with Noah on our little balcony, string lights dancing above us, the city murmuring below. I had just finished blocking Rachel, then Chris, then Olivia, even my mother. Not out of spite, not with anger, with grace, with a full stop. Noah watched me. Do you regret it? He asked. I thought about the question. The years I'd spent waiting at metaphorical doors, knocking with gifts, holding breath for scraps of affection, smiling through erasure. Then I thought of the wedding. The light, the people who clapped when I walked down the aisle, not because they had to, but because they loved me. I looked at him. No, I said. I feel clean, like I finally swept out the attic of my memory and threw out everything that was keeping the light out. He squeezed my hand. I used to think I was the leftover, the tag along, the one forgotten when the chairs were counted. But now I see the truth. I was never the footnote, I was always the main character, and now I'm writing the story myself.